Right, we're on YouTube. We have a few more, I would say, seconds that we will begin.
Okay, it's exciting.
Definitely. Welcome, everyone. I am Dr. Neva here with Global Business. I basically call myself a global leadership strategist because I give you a global leadership experience through some great events that we do, the International Women's Conference. By the way, guys, that is coming up in March 7th. Also, we have the International Wealth Summit as well. Next year, we're preparing for that, and we have our Global Leadership Retreat. Look out for that next May. And there are a lot of different things. I do have to keep you posted, but don't want to digress and get off topic. We have a wonderful, wonderful guest with us today. And you know how I do it. Prefer for my guests to introduce themselves. So, Gilmore, take it away. Who are you? Tell the audience.
Who am I? Well, I am always changing. That's one of the things I like about life. And my journey, you could say, began with my father. He is an organization development professional. He's 97, and I learned from him and started working with him back in 1984. I'm actually speaking with him in Spokane, Washington, live on September 29th at the Organization Development Network Conference this year. It's in his hometown, so that's like the only live performance he can do now is if it's right in his hometown. So pretty exciting. I'll be flying to Spokane and we'll be with a live audience talking about the first OD work I ever did, organization development work, which was a citizens engagement project to we ended up with 10,000 people in Spokane, Washington, all voting on a future direction for their downtown riverfront park. And so I've been doing organization development work ever since. It's taken me all over the world. And so I've just been blessed by that. And then there's just simple methods that I think anyone can use for social change or for improving organizations. So I'll be happy to chat some about that based on where you want to go, Neva.
Yeah, definitely. And wow, your dad, I love to hear when people, reach to a certain age and still doing what they're passionate about. It like brings joy, right? Because for me, a lot of stuff that I do, and I'm sure for you as well, this passion that keeps us going, something that we believe in, and to reach a certain age and can do it. So congrats to your dad and, keep up the good work. So, Gilmore, you come from a family legacy of organization development, as you stated, and from what I understood, goes back to like the 1950s, right? So what is it like growing up around that kind of thinking? And how did, your father's work shape your own approach?
Well, quite a bit. So he was influenced by Kurt Lewin, who passed away in 1947. 6 years later, Dad happened upon a tea group at Boston University, and that was his first exposure to Lewin's work in organization development. And a tea group is a process where you enter through your interactions with the other participants and with whoever's running it. Uh, you set aside the person you pretend to be, and you pay attention to your current emotions in your interactions. You pay attention to how do you really understand others. And so you learn from sprinklings of theory, you apply it right away to what's happening now. and how do you be the best you can be in the moment you're in? And that becomes the groundwork for how do I influence in organizations? How do I influence the world I'm in? How do I lead? How do I follow? What authority issues do I have? Am I afraid to speak to people in positions of power? Uh, it's just a very freeing process. So he took that, he kept applying it. As a kid, I was in little groups. In Nashville, we lived in Nashville. It was segregated. And so Dad got in some trouble for this, but he had integrated church camps. And so I was in groups with uh, black kids when I was a little kid, and it wasn't super sophisticated learning. It was more of us just getting to know each other. What do we like? What do we have in common?
Right.
And yeah, so that's just sort of the spirit of it. And I still do T group work in organizations where workers and bosses or people in positions of authority are all mixed together talking about, well, what's what happening now in this organization, and how can we learn from each other and help each other instead of just fighting with each other.
Now, my question, was there a particular moment based on what you just said? Was there a particular moment when you knew this was, your calling to, just like your dad? Do you recall when you're like, this is me and I gotta do it?
I knew as a teenager that I really liked what I saw of my father and his work. And so I was preparing myself as best I could to see if I could join in it. And so through college, I went to an experimental college called the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, where you got to sit in small groups with the professors and you had to read the material and actually talk out loud about what you thought it meant. And so I did my best to prepare, and then it just happened to be circumstances. There was a recession in 1984 when I graduated with my master's degree, and Dad was happy to take me as a partner and apprentice me, really. And he couldn't pay me much. I got room and board and a little bit of pay, but we started on various projects, and I mean, I just learned a whole lot right away about, like I was in a tomato processing plant, Contadina,
Hmm.
and I worked with every group in the plant and helped workers and their supervisors just talk about what's in the way of getting the work done and what can we do about it. And so it's all very ground level approach to changing organizations, not just a top-down approach, although the leaders have to be, clear about what they're trying to accomplish and support it, of course.
Now, thanks, Gilmore. You mentioned that or described Kurt Lewin's method as the most reliable path to progress. What is it about this approach, Lewin's approach, that you believe still outshines the more modern theories of change?
Well, it's pretty simple. He demonstrated, and he always did what he called action research, and usually he'd have like a group that was just doing things the old-fashioned way, like farmers. The government wanted farmers to irrigate differently during the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl years. Uh, and it was in their interest to irrigate differently because their crops were dying. But still, they would send out an expert who would lecture at them, and not much would happen. And so then the government used Lewin a lot at that time, and he went out to the Midwest and he said, look, you have one group of farmers and just lecture at them the way you normally do, and we'll track over time what happens. Now, another group of farmers with the same lecturer, the lecturer would just give a nutshell of what the government was advising. And then the farmers, with Lewin's help, would talk to each other. What sense are you making out of this expert's advice? What do you know that he doesn't know? And I can say he because at the time it was definitely male experts coming out from the government. What do you know that he doesn't know? Uh, what do you think are flaws in this approach? And so the farmers would kick it around, and then finally the big question was, well, what do you think you should do? And when the people facing the problem, whether it was racism in Connecticut that Lewin worked on, whether it was in organizations, whether it was the farmers, a whole bunch of different groups, if the people facing the problem came up with their own approach, then they would implement that approach with high motivation and they would pull it off. So, like 90% of the things those farmers said they would do, they did. Whereas the group that just got lectured at, maybe 5% of the things that were suggested got done. And it just works the same way in organizations. People want to influence. And if you let them try things, and if you look at it from the worker's perspective, they can't get spare parts when they need them. They don't
Mhm.
have the material. Things are falling apart. Uh, they will solve things. They'll feel good about it. You'll get higher performance and higher morale. And it just takes a shift in, is it the leaders doing all the thinking? Is it the consultant doing all the thinking? Or are you really helping people at every level do their own thinking and do their best to pull things off? And any organization that does that that I've ever been part of, then they succeed. They just get all kinds of stuff done that they didn't even know was possible. So I think you don't have to be a professional to apply the same methods.
Great. Great. Okay, so your work with T groups and experimental learning, is both bold and unconventional, but can you walk us through, what does a T group actually feels like? Or, you know, let's imagine I was in one of your T groups. What might surprise me the most? Or
Well,
maybe it won't surprise me. I don't know. But boy, what do you think?
the groups usually are kind of bewildered at first because the goal of the T group is to talk about like how do you feel in this moment?
Mhm.
And so to pay attention to your emotions and to honor them is a new experience. Like most people have been socialized to where they're afraid to admit that they're upset, or they're afraid to admit that they're afraid. And so, but all these things are real. And so if you can let yourself experience what's truly happening in you and
Mhm.
between you and others and talk about it, it's just a different experience. It takes a little getting used to. Anything that's new, people are usually nervous about it first because they're thinking, I want to look good. I don't want to seem like I'm foolish. How will I fit into this experience? All the stuff that humans carry with them around their self-esteem. And then when they start to get it, the task actually is to really be me. And the more I can do that, the more I bring to interactions, to leading, to following. So it's a group experience where you don't just have a topic,
Mhm.
but the topic's actually what's happening now. How do I be fully present right now and trust my own experience, or honor my own experience, and talk about it? And that is a very freeing thing as a human being to more and more allow yourself to be genuine with people with some responsibility. Like we all have judgments, and it doesn't help to say, well, I think you're an idiot, to just go with your judgment that's negative about somebody. but rather to get it that, well, where's that judgment coming from? It's coming from
Mhm.
inside me somehow. And, what experiences did I go through that leads me to often have these kinds of judgments? So people start to take responsibility for how they're viewing others. And then there's skills that are really helpful with that, like how to get down to, well, what they actually say that I'm reacting to, instead of just, getting caught up in my judgment as if that's the only truth.
Right.
So, I don't know if that's
Yeah, yeah,
seems different or not, but that's the essence of a T group.
it gives you a lot to think about. That's what I gathered, um, and showing up in your truth. That's the way I would translate it in my head. So yeah. Now, guys,
Hmm.
it's your first time being here. We are here every Wednesday at noon. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm not able to interact with you now, but definitely feel free to leave a question. You can come back later on and answer the questions. But if you would like to join us in the future, definitely reach out to us. You see in the back, Nevalliance, nevalliance.com. That's how you can reach out, or info@nevalliance.com. So let's continue, Gilmore. Appreciate the information that you're giving because it's very insightful. My next question to you is, you've written about using social science to address racism and sexism. And I just want to, before this, we're talking like the social science just jumped out at me because I mentioned to you behind previously, like my master's is in social science, so I'm very intrigued with people's behavior, religious aspect, culture, and all that wonderful stuff. But you've written about using social science to address racism and sexism. How do you see organizational development playing a role in dismantling these social diseases, and not just talking about equity, but truly changing systems? Love your feedback on that.
Well, I love your questions. I I just rely heavily on Kurt Lewin's social science. Really, he created social science. He was the first person to take psychology and anthropology and anything that seemed related and mix it together. And and he applied it himself to, well, he was a Jewish male growing up in Germany. He was born in 1890, and he was there throughout the rise of Hitler, right up to 1933 when he fled and got to the United States. It wasn't easy. We weren't very welcoming at the time. And we've gone through many periods like this where we are not very welcoming. And so his approach was collaborative. You bring people in, like again in Connecticut, he was hired by the Connecticut state government to work on racial tension and equity. And so he brought in anyone who was willing to participate. The business leaders who were always at that time white males, all the social workers that were working on it, people who cared about decreasing prejudice in society. And so I think that's a critical thing in any attempt to make a more democratic world. And by democratic, I mean you really have respect for each person in the system that you're in, and they're allowed to influence within the structure. I mean, the structure, we elect people, and so the people, once they're elected, need to make decisions and do things. It's not like we vote on everything that happens, but we're able to influence because we at least get to help pick who's in charge. And so all his principles are based on democracy, really. And so he looked a lot at what went wrong in Germany. They elected Hitler. And how do you avoid uh, having autocratic influences take over a democracy. And the playbook's always the same. For autocrats, they attack a weak group, and yet at the same time, they try to convince everyone else that the weak group is dangerous. And so they want us to fear the weak group. And so they play, the playbook gets repeated, unfortunately. And in our culture, the United States I'm talking about, I really got clear for me when I wrote this book, Diversity Without Dogma. Well, I don't know if you can, it's not
I
so
see you
easy.
trying to put it up. It's
Virtual
telling it now,
backgrounds,
but
yeah. Okay, well, that's not going to work. Anyway, several of my books are based on Lewin, and really in
I'm
this
sorry, can you state the name of the book, please?
diversity without dogma.
Okay.
So the in our cultural history of this country, from the beginning, we had autocrats come, the Virginia colony. It wasn't about religious freedom. It was to make money for the king and the Church of England. And they brought the ruling class, and then they brought like 100. The very first people that arrived were, a lot of them were Irish indentured servants. And so right away we had class in the US. And then when they started to bring in slaves, because they had the means to make money in Virginia with tobacco, uh, the slaves and the Irish kept rising up and trying to overthrow the aristocrats. Well, they said, what are we going to do about that? We're going to divide and conquer. We're going to put the Irish, we're going to give them a promotion. We're going to call them white, and we're going to have them be the overseers of the blacks. And so they used race from the beginning to divide and conquer and to truly create a culture that overcomes that. Well, we're far from it, I think. But to overcome that, we have to collaborate. We can't have DEI programs that say, well, you're all white, so you're all automatically biased and racist because you're part of the power structure. And that approach has led to a lot of white people being upset. And that doesn't help any. It helps to say, look, this is a problem, prejudice, sexism, racism. It's not good for us. It's a social disease, and it's being exploited by people who want to be in charge. We have to come together. We have to invite anybody in who's willing to help create a better society, one that's really based on respect for everybody from every walk of life. And so that's what I advocate for in that book. And I write about the whole history of the US in it because the current things that are going on that I don't approve of are really just a continuation of, I think, our history so far. We haven't really moved beyond this dividing and conquering strategy. And it doesn't
Yeah.
help if those of us who want things to be better also divide. It doesn't help any. So,
Well, divide and conquer, right? And
yep,
as you said, history repeats itself. The playbook never really changes. And then there are people who don't read the playbook or should read the playbook, so it's, and you mentioned, the card where, with the Irish. Now, let's give you more money, and now you are considered white, right? Now,
yep,
look at it in other parts of the world, though, it might be color. So your shade,
mm-hmm,
yes, because your shade is lighter, and it's where, you're, I used to say brighter. So you're better, right? So you use your own, because they're lighter, to depress those that are darker. But it's recycled. It's like we can never get out of this circus, as I call it. It's always something, we come back. We think we're going ahead, but we somehow unfortunately circle back, right?
Yep, and
Uh,
Lewin believed that it was going to be social science that would help humanity overcome that. And it makes sense to me, but people don't know the social science. And you had to be in Athens in that democracy, you had to be an active citizen who participated in civic conversations to even have the right to vote. Of course, they weren't a perfect democracy. It was landowners who could vote. It was men who could participate, so they had their own blind spots. But certainly in the United States, there's no standard of like really participating or learning. And so a lot of people vote, they don't even know what's going on until the last day, and then they just make a decision. And I've talked to a bunch of people who said, well, I heard that the current president was a businessman, so I voted for him. And just we should have some sort of, well, to be democratic, we have to have a higher standard of people learning and education and all that stuff that gets attacked really by people that want power uh, and don't care about democracy.
So Gilmore, knowledge is key, and that's is very important, right? But let's go on a lighter note. Let's move on because time is essence. And you touched on some great stuff, and appreciate you for that. Now, on a lighter note, you've been called a yachty by Jamaicans, and
It's a
you're
great
married
honor.
to a Jamaican queen, right? So, how has your Jamaican culture influence your worldwide or your worldview, your leadership style, or even your writing? Is there anything there that,
Well,
influenced?
I think all people that should travel some and be in other cultures. And I had the privilege in 1999, I started in Jamaica doing tea groups in a bauxite refinery and helping to create a culture in that refinery. I worked with everybody in that refinery and all the small groups and everything to same type of stuff. They would identify what's in the way of the work and come up with their own solutions. And but they also about half the people in the plant went through tea group workshops and so but in that process it just helped me be humble. I was different, and I was, very much welcomed. So I appreciate that about Jamaican culture. It's certainly I have a big attachment there. You mentioned I was talking. I think you mentioned that I'm married to a Jamaican, and so I'm very fortunate to have that experience. And yeah, and they struggle with the same things that you mentioned earlier. Like if you're a light-skinned Jamaican, you're more likely to get certain jobs and professions, or even be at the top of an organization. And so they have perpetuated some of the same prejudice, really, even within a culture that you would think is maybe uniform or united, which it is in many ways. Out of many, one. Uh, it's so yeah. I just appreciate the whole playfulness of the really it's you could say around the equator of the world, people who there's just a less uptightness, you could say, in cultures around the equator. And partially that people say it's because in the north in the past, if you didn't harvest food right away and so on, you'd die in the winter. And my wife grew up with all kinds of food just right there in her yard, so it was less of it was a different experience. It's a different experience.
Well, thank you so much, Gilmore, for the time. It's time to go, but how can they reach you real quickly?
Well, there's crosbyod.com. So that's my website. If you just Google me, Gilmore Crosby, there's a fair amount of stuff out there now on the web. So uh, it's not too hard to find me. And I'm happy to talk to anybody. I just enjoy chatting, so I don't like charge people just to talk to me. I'm Glad to talk. I'm glad to do a little coaching. It's I'm 66, so I just want to influence a better future as in the time I've got. I want to influence as much as I can towards a more uh, humane, democratic future for humanity.
Definitely. Thank you so much. It's one thing that you said, and I'm going to depart with this. You said everyone should travel. When I was in high school, I had a teacher, literature teacher, and he said to me, when you travel, the world opens up. You learn so much more. If you can't travel, open a book. And for me, knowledge is key. All right.
Hmm.
Until next time, I am Dr. Neva with Nevalliance. This is Global Business. Bye.